Welcome to podcast episode 52 of Influence and Growth Mastery. Today's interview is with Rhonda Green. Rhonda is an author, entrepreneur, and a mentor. She developed an online course that shows survivors of domestic violence how to get their lives back on track. She shares her journey in order to chart the path of other survivors of abuse who are stuck in past pain. After overcoming 2 abusive relationships, she saw the pattern that kept her from living. Rhonda teaches that there's a cycle to breaking free and staying free. She is the author of 7 Ways to Free Your Mind After Abuse, 40 Questions Before a First Date, and How Much is Your Dirt Worth? Rhonda, welcome to the show tonight. It's such a pleasure to have you a guest on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Tanya. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Great. I'm so glad that you are. I can't even imagine what you've been through. The struggles, the challenges, obviously the darkness, but I'm so thankful that you have overcome and felt the need to start the mission that you're on, and that you give so much passionately to other women. And I'm anxious to hear a whole lot more about that this evening. So tell us, how does someone know, Rhonda, that they're in an abusive relationship? You know, previously, I've had conversations with people and I've wondered, you know, are they in an abusive relationship? But I wonder oftentimes if they know they're in an abusive relationship. How do they know? And is it possible that people really think what they're going through is normal?
Well, I'll start off by saying there are different forms of abuse. There can be emotional abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse. Most often we can easily recognize physical abuse because we know that hitting in any form, it's not normal. It's not acceptable. What happens is the other forms of abuse are not as easily identified. For example, someone may not recognize emotional or even financial abuse. I left that one out. They may not recognize that. Let's say, for example, financial abuse, because that's one thing that will hinder women the most when they come out of a relationship. If you are in a financially abusive relationship, the other person, male or female, is exercising control over everything you do via finances. Some people think that, okay, well, he just gives me an allowance. Well, that's great, but there are some times when people can give you allowance where they don't give you enough. They don't give you access to the rest of the money. It may be your own money that they've taken from you. So things like that are signs of financial abuse. Of course, the physical abuse is easy to recognize. The emotional abuse is not as easy to recognize. We as women tend to be such caregivers that we just push things under the rug. We think, oh, I'm going to give him another chance. He did not mean it, or she did not mean what she said. But people will take emotional, your feelings. For example, when you rely on someone, you trust someone, you give them intimate information about you, and they use that against you. That's emotional abuse, especially when they do it in front of other people. Like if you and I became best friends, obviously you're going to know a lot about me that everyone else doesn't because of our closeness. But if you were to take that information and use it against me in a way to make me feel demeaned, to embarrass me, to hurt me, it's not being shared or talked about to edify me and make me better, then it becomes emotional abuse.
Wow. You've mentioned some things that I'll just be honest with you, I haven't even thought about those being, you know, abuse. And I'll even mention, you know, the financial aspects of those. You know, I know lots of people who have their money or his money, her money, and there's allowances that are exchanged back and forth. And, that's, I guess that would be a red flag in itself. Very, very good point there. What about your own journey? Mentioned in your bio that you had been through 2 abusive relationships yourself without going through, too much of the depthness of the challenges and the darkness there. What can you share that would be beneficial about what you've been through to the audience that might help?
The first abusive relationship, I was actually a college student, so I was very young. And I think that one thing that parents must recognize is, one, you have to do your best to prepare your children for everything that they may face in the world. My parents have been happily married for 47 years, so I never, ever even heard them argue. So for me, I grew up in an environment where it was almost like a fairy tale. And I understand as a parent, you protect your children. You want to give them stability and security. So they made a decision in their marriage never to argue in front of the children. Well, for me, that became a hindrance because it did not show me a way to resolve conflict. I mean, I have siblings, but siblings are going to fuss and fight and do all kinds of things because they're siblings. At the end of the day, they're never going to truly hurt each other. It's all play and out of love. But when it comes to being romantically involved in someone, I was not able to navigate a space with someone who came from the opposite type home, because the gentleman I dated in college, his parents experienced abuse within the marriage and he experienced abuse as a child. So there was already a cycle that I was walking into unknowingly. So for parents, I would say, make sure your children are aware of the things that go on outside of your household, because you've got to prepare them so that if they face something that you are not there with them, they know how to handle it and react. Because when he first hit me, I was in my dorm room. It was out of the blue. I had no idea what was going on, what the conversation was that even, made him strike me. But I was so in shock. I was frozen. I did not know how to respond. And so my first instinct was, of course, if you hit someone, they're going to, try to just step back. But stepping back doesn't always mean you're stepping up for yourself, not standing up and saying, you know what, I need to leave. This is it. You're not allowed in my space. You're not allowed in my life. So make sure that you prepare your children, your friends, young adults, teens for things that they may face in the world, and not just in relationships. My second abusive relationship was when I was in my early 20s. And that's why I believe there's definitely a cycle, because if you don't break that cycle within, you're going to continue to settle and attract the things that got you in that situation the first time. It's not your fault, but like-minded people will attract to like-minded people. When I say like-minded, I mean weak, because a man is definitely weak when he feels he can only get his strength and feel like a man by having power over a woman. So I know that the woman I was in my 19, 20 years old self is not the same woman I am today. I'm a much stronger woman who can identify the red flags. I can even tell a man who's insecure in himself, because I know that when you're insecure in yourself, it shows in different ways. And that can become a abusive relationship, because when you have one person who's very insecure, they want you to also be less of who you are so that they don't feel inadequate.
Wow. Let me ask you this. So you talk about sharing with your children what goes on in the outer world. And of course, this makes me think of other types of abuse and trauma and all of those things. How much do you share? How much is too much to share? What's that fine line? I mean, can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, of course, it has to be age appropriate. Okay, so I'm not talking about telling a 2-year-old, hey, Yeah. So you have to determine, like everything else that you teach your child, expose them to, you need to determine, can they handle it? And what age can they handle it? I mean, I have a friend who told me one time, and I'm just going to not change the subject, but just to give you an example. I have a friend, male friend, older gentleman. He grew up in a community where there were no people who looked like him. He's an older white male. There's no one in his community that looked like him. So he understood how to interact with people who didn't have the same culture. And the opposite is true. If you are in a community where everyone looks like you, when you go outside that community, you begin to see life in different ways because you have been exposed to a different culture. So in the same way with children, when they're young, expose them to different things, and show them things like my daughter and I, we have volunteered together. So for someone who won't ever experience homelessness or that lifestyle or see people strung out on drugs, then seeing that helplessness in someone else and being able to instill in them, have compassion for other people, lets them know that this does exist and how you as a human being are supposed to help the person. So that's kind of what I'm talking about when I say expose children. It's just the normal things you would teach them anyway. It's just that I understand when parents say, hey, I don't want our child to be exposed to the arguments. But that's when you as a parent have to say, well, we have to find other ways to teach them how to resolve conflict. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And the reason I asked that question is, I think of things that do go on in the world, and I am I'm going to say I'm probably overly protective with my grandkids. And so I find myself sometimes sharing with them things that I see on the news or a notification that I get. And I'm like, oh my goodness, guys, listen to this. Let me share this story with you. And then I try to educate them. And I'll say, I'm not telling you this to scare you, but it's just things I want you to be aware of because these things are real out there in the world. And they will say to me, you just said you didn't want to scare me, but you just told me this terrible, scary story. But it's because I want them to be safe or to know that these types of things happen or to be aware of things that can happen at school or whatever. But I think I find myself sometimes maybe sharing a little bit more than maybe what other parents may. I don't know. And that's why I was asking that question, because I was asking it for my own self.
I don't think you're sharing too much. Yeah. I don't think you're sharing too much because having the knowledge and the wisdom and the experience can only come from living life and from someone teaching you. So what you're doing is basically educating them, but you can always take it a step further and say, if you were in the room and you notice this happening across the room, how would you react? And that way you're also getting them to think, okay, now I remember when I had this conversation with my grandmother, if I was ever in this situation. Unfortunately, we live in a world now, you have to talk about things like gun violence in schools. And so that would be one where you can just ask your child, how would you react? What would you do? What are the next steps if this were to happen to you? I never had those conversations with my parents about being in an abusive relationship. Honestly, I never ever knew that existed. It was not even in my world. None of my friends experienced it. And even when I was in college, I was still blind to the fact that people actually are going through this. So that's why it's important to have those conversations to make people aware someone else is going through this. 1 in 3 women are abused.
I saw that statistic on your website, and that really surprised me. That seems so large. And I never saw my parents fight and argue either. But as for siblings, we did all the time, and we were punished for that. And we had to, sometimes we had to do certain things until we could tell each other that we loved each other and hug each other, and we had to mean it, So, well, tell us, as you went through those two abusive relationships, you obviously, have found success after that. How did you find success? What led you to where you are today?
Well, I'm going to answer that by tying it into what you just said. When you have sibling squabbles, you guys hug, kiss, make up, and people do that in abusive relationships. The difference is with your sibling, you're still safe. There's never a time where I felt unsafe with my sisters or my brother. Never. We could just have been throwing, pillows at each other, whatever, but I never felt unsafe. That's the difference when you're in an abusive relationship. You are not in a safe space.
Got it.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question? I went off on that and forgot your question.
No, that's it. I mean, you're headed in the right direction, I think, is because I was like, how did you go from where you were to where you are today and find the success? Because you coach people and help people to get from where they are in the abusive relationship through success. And we'll talk a little bit in a minute how you do that. But,
Yes.
I'm just curious.
Thank you.
How did you get there? Because, did you have somebody that helped you, that coached you through it? Or did you do that on your own and just fall in love with that process and figured it all out by yourself?
Here's the thing. I don't think there's any process you fall in love with, no matter what's going on in life, because process requires change. When I got out of that second relationship, because I had a young daughter that was not her father, but I had a young daughter during that time who I met him after, she was maybe 3 or 4. So she saw some of that going on, and I wanted to make sure that she was okay. So I took her to counseling. I went to one counseling session, and it probably was the wrong counselor. She was not she did not specialize in abusive relationship. So I decided that counseling wasn't going to do me any good. Not only that, I was out of the relationship, which is what everybody wanted for me. So now everybody's happy. I'm out of the relationship. I can put this behind me. Everyone's patting me on the back for, hey, I'm so glad you finally saw you were worth more than that and that you're moving on. But that was all external. I did not move on internally. And what I mean by that is because I was not safe in my own self. I was not safe and secure in my own decisions. I didn't trust my decisions because after all, I had made the same mistake twice. What I had to come to realization is it wasn't like my mistake. It wasn't a burden for me to carry. It was something for me to learn from. It was an experience. It was an unfortunate experience, but no one goes through life without having bad and good experiences. So I had to put it in perspective as to what it was. It doesn't mean that I'm not worthy. It doesn't mean I'm not worth love. It just meant that I chose a relationship and I chose that person over myself. So in the process, which for me took a long time because, like I said, I had a daughter. So I had someone to just concentrate and focus on. I had someone to pour myself into. And then I also moved on to other relationships. And I moved on to other relationships that were not abusive, but they were probably not the best relationships after all. They ended. I'm still single. But the thing was, I had to look back and say, hey, what is it about the way I am choosing people? What is it about the way I'm living my life? What is it about the way I allow things to happen in my life that's taken me off the path that I need to be on to be whole, to be happy, and to truly get back to being me again? Because when you're in a relationship, so many times you aren't you. You meet someone, you're putting your best foot forward. He or she might be trying to impress you. and not really being themselves. That goes for all of us. We want to make the best first impression. But if you get lost in who you are, how can you make a first impression when you don't even know how to impress them with yourself? So I had to go on a whole journey and stop self-sabotaging myself, stop self-sabotaging my relationships, find the inner confidence and do the work to find me again. Because if you asked me 20 years ago, who are you? I would have been like, I don't really know. So now it's like, I know who I am. I know what I enjoy. I can be happy and content just being me, just being single. I can sit in a room. Matter of fact, I do this sometimes. I wouldn't recommend it, but some weekends I just stay in my pajamas all weekend, binge watch TV, have some popcorn, some chocolate chip cookies, ice cream, all my favorites. Don't do this too often, but you have to treat yourself, indulge, and still be happy. And I'm not doing all those things because I'm sad and depressed. I'm doing those things because I'm greedy and I like food. But you have to learn how to be
That's your me
comfortable
time.
with being you. Exactly. Be comfortable with being you. And that is a process. Even if you were not involved in an abusive relationship, it is a process. The older you get, the longer you live, the more experiences you have, the wiser you are, and the more grounded you are in who you are inside.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really powerful in what you say there, because I can agree with that. Early on in my business, it was all about my business. It was like who Tanya Gossage was her business. It was Gossage Performance Consulting. And my team wanted me to brand me. And I was like, I am Gossage Performance Consulting, and so now that I'm branding me and, and I hear Brandon talk about who are you? Who am I now know who I am. And I think so many people, and I'll just say women, but I believe it's men too. They don't know who they are. Kids, they don't know who they are. And, we need to take a step back and just really figure that out. And I had to do several of those exercises that that Brendan had asked us to do before I really, really, really figured out who I was.
Yes. And that's one of the things I help women on that journey, because a lot of times they don't know who they are. It's like, you have your performance business, but that's what you do. It's not necessarily who you are. And one of the exercises I always have women, and I have a little mirror here, is I tell them, make sure you look in the mirror every day and speak to yourself. We talk to other people to get to know them, right? But how much time do you really spend? Look yourself in the eye, feel whatever feelings you're feeling, take a deep breath and enjoy being you. Look in the mirror the same way you would gaze in somebody else's eyes and say, oh, I just love spending this time with you. You make me happy. I'm so glad you're a part of my life. I'm so happy to get to know you on an intimate level. Well, how many times do we do that with ourselves? And that's why I tell women the first step is getting back to you. And I do believe children, they have such innocence and they know who they are. Babies, they aren't afraid to cry and let you know that they're hungry. No. But then we start telling them, hush, 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 don't be so loud. And we stifle their growth of their personalities because we're molding them into a mold that fits us, societal norms. And there's nothing wrong with societal norms unless you're letting that person lose themselves and not be who they are. And so we just have to get back to being our own unique individual self, because we are unique creatures, just like our fingerprints. No one has the same fingerprints and no one has the exact same personality. So get to know yours.
Right. Yes, I love that. And that really makes me think about the next thing I wanted to talk about. And that is, for most women who go through these relationships, they get out. It's almost like they're starting completely over, a brand new life. It's, obviously they're not going back to their 20s, but they have to relearn a lot of things, or it seems like to me they would have to relearn a lot of things. And for some, I've heard women say, I don't know how to do anything. He kept the finances. He took care of the cars. He did this, he did that. I don't know how to do anything. And I think, oh my goodness, I would never let myself get into that type of situation. But there are women who do. And so, but even if they did know how to do those things, when they walk away, I would think that it's almost like starting over. And when I say that, I'm thinking of self-doubt, self-confidence, all of these things, new budgets, all of these things, new home. Talk to me about that a little bit. How do you help them through that process, and even and to start that healing process?
Yeah. And so for anyone who's listening, I want you to know that there's a difference between being dependent on someone who is dependable, because I know there are husband and wives out there who, for example, my mom doesn't pump gas. That doesn't mean she's in an abusive relationship. That just means my dad takes very good care of her and she doesn't have to worry about anything. It's when they are in relationships that have other things going, where that person's not doing this so that life is easier for you, but they're doing this to handicap you, on top of the financial, the emotional, the mental, and the physical abuse. So combine all those, because normally it's not just one by itself. So when you are dealing with someone who's feels like they're at a loss, they're handicapped, they don't know how to move on. In the very beginning, we always do an exercise where I have them tell me what you dream your life would look like. So I literally have them say, take a deep breath, close your eyes. There's not a care in the world. You're living your perfect life. Now tell me what that looks like. When I get them to dream, I've had people say, you know what? I'll have a nice house on the beach. My kids are happy. I'm just going to sit on the porch with a nice cold glass of ice water. And they usually are just basking in peace, because they don't have the stress of being with someone who is not treating them right. They don't have the stress of finances, all the things that's weighing them down. They just want that peace. And when I get them to dream, I say, okay, now we know what your perfect life looks like. Let's work backwards and get there. And we walk through everything that they need to become to get there. And I say become because if you are just trying to go through the motions, it's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
I went through the motions for years. I had a good job. I was climbing the corporate ladder. I was being a mom. So everything looked good from the outside in, but I wasn't being those things. I was giving off that appearance and aura, but I had to be those things. So I get the women to look at what their perfect dream life would look like. Once we can envision that, you can see it, we can work towards it.
I love that. Yes, I love that exercise too. And one of the things that you have to help them to really work backwards, I would say, is your 6 weeks course. Tell us a little bit about that.
So during my 6-week course, I basically give one-on-one sessions every week. And it's like a course. You have homework assignments. And if you don't do your homework assignment, we can't move on to the next step. So there are books to read. There's meditations. I have a really good meditation on there. I'm not going to tell all the details, but for a woman who has survived, I'm telling you, it is something. It's called The Hallway of the Mind. And I actually had a recording artist to do it for me. And it takes them through a meditation where it really frees them. And it's all about being free mentally. And that's why we also start with the book, 7 Ways to Free Your Mind After Abuse. That's a prerequisite to the course. And I take them through different steps so that you can really understand that you are bound. Because a lot of times people, you can be in chains and not know it. Your mind can be bound, but you not realize it, because what you lived and experienced has become your norm. And I have to get you to see, you got to free your mind and break that cycle, because what you thought was normal, it's not. And so we go through that. We go through the meditations. We read different books. We discuss books. I also, during the one-on-ones, we talk about listening skills, because I need individuals to understand you have to listen, whether it's your children or the other person, because people will definitely tell you and show you who they are. So I've helped them with improving their listening skills, their career skills. I've had women who wanted to run a business, so I help them with that. For someone who that's their track, we go through starting a business. We go through all the steps with getting business funding. So it's not just getting one area of your life back on step. We move to get every area of finances, emotions, everything because I want to leave them with the tools that they need to make sure that they do live their best life. And 10 years from now, they're going to look back and say, I did everything. And it started with this one little 6-week program where I had someone to hold my hand and give me the support I needed at that time where I couldn't see myself.
Wow, I love that. So, so helping them see, well, I'm going to call it a roadmap, Rhonda. You're giving them, a roadmap after the challenges, the frustration, the darkness that they've been through success. And if they follow that, then they'll get there, but they have to do the work. And I would think that going through that work could be challenging, because they have all these things to work through. But if they do that work, how much powerful that would be for them.
Yes, because you are at a state in your life where it's like you came to a fork in the road. You can go left, or you can go right, or you can go backwards. So, of course, for the women and unfortunately, I've had someone come to me and decided to stay with the individual. I don't work with anyone who's in that situation, because I want to know you're serious, and I can't be on that yo-yo with you. So it's unfortunate, but I understand when your heart's involved, your feelings are involved, and you've been with someone for so long, it's hard to let go. So everyone I work with is out of the relationship, and they have a choice. They can go right or left. And if you want to walk with me, I'll take you down the path where everything's catered to you, because I understand people are different individuals and at different stages in life, but I still cater the program to them along with the basic parts that we go through. So I make sure that by the time we have finished working together, that you are at a place where you can stand on your own 2 feet, and then you can navigate relationships with yourself, your relationship with God, your relationship with your children, relationship with others in a way that's positive, and that you understand your feelings and you stay in touch with your feelings and stay in touch with who you are, because that's what matters most. You only have one life on this earth, and no one else gets to live it for you, and you can choose how you want to live it. So we want to live a life of splendor and joy and happiness, even after overcoming the worst thing that could possibly have happened to us.
And be on the road. You're helping them get through recovery, but then be on the road to freedom.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because so many people don't understand or even know how to live free. And if you think about people who go to work for 40, 50 hours a week and they're doing something they dislike, that's not freedom. So everybody can relate to being at a place where you're not living a free life. And for these women, that's all we're doing. We're getting them to the place where they can enjoy waking up every morning, being thankful, being grateful, getting out there and living life again to its fullest.
No, being in a place of all of that is not freedom. So I know you have an ebook. The ebook is called, I'm looking down here, 7 Ways to Free Your Mind After Abuse. Without sharing all of the goodness that's in that ebook, share just maybe in 2 sentences what we could get from that ebook and how we can get that ebook if we're interested.
Okay, it's going to take more than 2 sentences, but I'll make it quick.
Go right ahead. You've got plenty of time. Go right ahead.
So let me give you an example. In the book, and this is because so many women come to me are parents, and they don't know how to navigate parenting after abuse, especially when the abuser was the child's father. So I remind women, hey, they are part of you and equally a part of your ex. So what you can do is, one, depending on the children's age, you can do the visitation that are supervised and coordinated by an outside agency. And most states have outside agencies that can help coordinate the drop off and pick up of children, so you don't actually have to interact with the spouse. And the other thing I tell them to do, which women love this, is create a time capsule. Because one thing that your child will always need to know is that when at some point in life, mom and dad did love each other, and they are not a product of something that was negative. That no matter how they came into this world and whatever was going on between mom and dad, they are a child that's very loved. So put in their pictures of the child with their father, put in their pictures, just memories that you all created as a family, just little things, and put it in a time capsule for that child to open, later on in a few years. You can do several. So every other year, maybe the child gets to open this and have those memories, positive memories of what life was like with the other parent, despite the bad sections of life. So there's little tips like that in there, as well as things like get rid of anything that gives you an emotional or spiritual soul tie to someone in your past. Rather, if that person gave you a watch, now every time you look at your watch, you're thinking, oh, I miss him. Get rid of that watch. It's that simple. So the book goes through 7 different steps. Those were just little tidbits that are part of those things that I mentioned in the book that can really help you truly become free in the mind, because it's a mental thing. If we can believe it up here, we can see it, we can feel it, we can live it. And the book, it's on my website. It's actually, you don't have to give me an email address. I understand some women don't want people to know. Some women are still in situations, but they can go to the website and just get the book so that it can help them.
That's wonderful. Something you made me think of when you talked about the time capsule. And I think that's so important because I'll tell you, there's so many situations out there today where, families go through those split situations. They may remarry, whatever, and they want to forget that spouse, and they destroy everything that was associated, and they forget that those children are related to that individual that they just disconnected from. And there's belongings that child may want. And like you said, there's memories there. And I often think they forget about the children in those situations. And the time capsule is such a wonderful idea. And I love the way that you phrase that. That's some really good information. I may just have to go to your website and get that information and use something like that just in a story sometime. I think that's so critical today, but I think that happens so often.
Because I wanted to just forget. I just wanted to forget that area of my life. And that's one of the reasons I understand you can't just sweep everything underneath the rug. You're going to have to face it. You have to find a way to accept this was a part of my life. We can't change the past, but we can change the way we look at it and how we move on from that experience.
Wow, that is really, really, really powerful. So if someone in the audience is dealing with this type of situation, they want to reach out to you, how do they reach out?
Well, if you are in an abusive relationship, the first thing you need to do is find a safe escape, create you a safety plan. There are many resources for that. You can reach out to your local police department. You can reach out to local agencies or the National Domestic Violence Hotline. If you are in a situation that is physically, emotionally, or mentally abusive or financially abusive, please make sure you find a way out and make sure that you can safely exit that relationship. Have your safety plan in place and find a way to leave. Don't keep going back and forth. As you know, a lot of women will go back, and unfortunately, they don't have another chance to get life back together and to live a life of happiness and wholeness because they chose to go back. And usually it gets worse. It always gets worse. But once someone is out of that relationship, they have moved on and they are ready to move on within themselves, then they can reach out to me. They can visit my website, rhondagreen.com, RHONDAGREEN.com. I'm also on social media as author Rhonda Green. So if you're on IG or TikTok, hopefully TikTok will be around, but on IG,
We don't know.
TikTok.
One day I think it's going to stay. The next day I think it's going to go. Who knows?
Right. I'm also on YouTube as Rhonda Green. So you can reach out to me. My contact information is on my website. I do check my private messages on social media. I will say that for anyone who reaches out and you're still in that relationship, I'm going to just help you, redirect to a resource that's there for you. But for women who have decided, hey, I'm no longer in this relationship, and I know now that I want to truly move on and get past this, but I'm so struggling, I'm there for you. I will support you. And if you cannot afford my program, just let me know and we can work something out. Maybe I can find a sponsor or help you do that. And I've probably worked with just as many women who just could not pay for the service. And I understand that. My goal is to impact someone's life. So if you say, hey, I can't afford that, so reach out to me and let's see how I can help you, because I want you to move on. I understand what it's like to be in a place where you just want to ball up and cry every night. But, maybe you have children, you're trying to hide the tears. Don't live your life like that because it impacts them. And we want your children to break the cycle as well, just the same way we want you as a woman who's a survivor to break that cycle.
Wow. You're making me extremely emotional. I'll just say this has been so powerful, and the work that you do is phenomenal. And I appreciate, number one, your passion, your mission, and the work that you do for women and kids. And,
Thank you.
You deserve a crown. And I am so appreciative that you took the time to be on the podcast this evening. I know it's late, but you endured the evening to be with me tonight, and I appreciate that. And I want you to know that for the ebook, we will put your website on the show notes or in the show notes for the podcast. And, we will, we honor you and just so thankful that you were here, because what you do is extremely important to save our women and children.
Thank you, Tanya, for having me. And again, to anyone who's listening, your life is worth so much more than whatever you're going through right now. Even if it's not abuse, maybe you're just having a hard time. understand that there's always tomorrow. So please look in the mirror, say I love you to you, and know that I love you. You're a human being. God loves you. And even when you think things are hopeless, don't give up, because it always gets better. There's always a brighter day. And thank you again, Tom.
Yes. Yes. That is wonderful. Thank you so much again for being here. And for those of you in the audience, if you have not already subscribed to Influence and Growth Mastery, we ask that you do that right now. Press the subscribe button or the follow button. And until next time, we will see you then. Of course, we're doing a podcast challenge right now. So we will have a podcast going live every day in the month of April. And then we will be back on a weekly schedule. So until tomorrow, goodbye.